Let's see, Adam is long forgotten. Lilith found love with an angel. Dark Mirage is still out there somewhere. Noah is probably drunk in whatever part of hell he went to for cursing Canaan. And Abraham is probably still the worst father we've discussed. But it was a promise to him from little Dick Yahweh that jump-starts this war of the Elohim. Let's do a quick rundown of events. The Egyptian prince plague bringer Moses is dead, and Joshua, the genocidal golden boy, takes over and immediately goes full war criminal. With Yahweh's blessing and occasional direct assistance, he conquers Canaan in a bloody series of terrorist attacks. City after city is slaughtered, men, women, children, even livestock. Leave nothing breathing becomes the divine policy. Jericho's walls fall, Ai is burned, entire populations are wiped out. Yahweh was extremely happy. The other gods of the land, Baal, Asherah, etc., were not. A long cycle of Israelites sin, Yahweh gets pissed, sells them to enemies, they cry, Yahweh sends a judge, temporary peace, and repeat. Highlights include Samson, a strong idiot who dies because of a haircut, and Deborah, one of the few competent people in the whole story. Fast forward, the people demand a king. Yahweh reluctantly gives them Saul. He starts off okay, but Yahweh helps him quickly becomes paranoid and unstable. Yahweh sends an evil spirit to torment him because that's healthy leadership. Saul eventually spirals and dies in battle. After that, we get the golden boy and massive douchebag. David kills Goliath, becomes king, unites Israel, but also commits adultery with Bathsheba, has her husband Uriah murdered. There's a census that pisses Yahweh off, because reasons Yahweh still loves him. Then we get King Solomon, David's son. Starts wise, builds the temple, but later goes full degenerate, 700 wives, 300 concubines, starts worshipping other gods, and heavily taxes, oppresses his own people. By the end, he's just another rich asshole who abandoned Yahweh for foreign pussy and idols. After Solomon, the kingdom splits into Israel north and Judah south. Both kingdoms spend centuries cycling through shitty kings, idolatry, and Yahweh throwing tantrums. Yahweh repeatedly sends prophets to scream at them. They rarely listen. Yahweh gets fed up and uses foreign empires as punishment. Assyria destroys the northern kingdom. Babylon destroys Judah, burns the temple, and takes the people into exile. Yahweh's chosen people get absolutely humbled. Persia eventually lets them return. They rebuild the temple, but it's never as cool as the first one. The prophets slowly fade out, and that is basically everything we've been told to believe happened by the followers of Yahweh, and they want us to believe this is the best God to worship. But let me tell you the real story. This is what really happened. After centuries of being just one God among many in the Elohim pantheon, Yahweh finally got tired of sharing power. He launched a long, brutal campaign to become the only God that mattered. Yahweh kicked things off with a swift and vicious supernatural war along the Canaanite borders. He didn't fight the other gods directly at first. Instead, he used the Israelites as his personal meat grinder. By directing human armies to slaughter rival tribes and destroy their sacred sites, Yahweh systematically captured or killed minor territorial deities, absorbing their divine essence to fuel his own ascension. Every burned temple and slaughtered village made him stronger. His celestial forces struck key targets. They defeated Dagon at Ashdod, shattering the Philistine god's power base. They took down the Chaos Dragon Yam at Byblos, cutting the older pantheon off from the sea and its trade routes. Yahweh personally oversaw the conquest of the ancient city of Jerusalem. He forced out the Twilight Prince Shalom, the original god of the city, and claimed Jerusalem, or as we know it, Jerusalem, entirely for himself, turning it into his solo throne on earth. Yahweh's chief corporate rival was Baal, the popular storm god. While the prophet Elijah was mocking Baal's worshippers on Mount Carmel because he knew Baal was already captured, Yahweh coordinated a divine ambush. Baal was overpowered, beaten, and dragged in chains to Tartarus. Yahweh stole his most famous titles, including Rider of the Clouds, and added them to his own growing resume. On earth, Elijah continued the roast session while the real Baal sat in a cell. And now, with the stolen power of dozens of absorbed gods flowing through him, Yahweh launched his final coup against the Aging High King of the gods, El Elyon. In a cataclysmic battle, El was defeated. He was stripped of most of his divinity, humiliated, and cast into the deepest pits of Tartarus, placed under the personal supervision of Samuel. To rub salt in the wound and legitimize his absolute rule, Yahweh took Asherah, El's wife and the mother of the gods, as his forced trophy bride. She became his consort, whether she wanted to or not. By the end of this long, bloody power grab, Yahweh had successfully gone from one god among many to the only god worth worshipping. The other deities were either dead, absorbed, demonized, or locked away. He rebranded himself as the supreme, jealous, all-powerful God of the universe. And the mortals below were forced to accept it or die. Even as Yahweh consolidated power, not every battle went his way. Yahweh's armies had cornered King Mesha of Moab at the city of Kir-Haeseth. In absolute desperation, Mesha did the unthinkable. On the city wall, in full view of both armies, he sacrificed his own firstborn son as a royal blood offering to his national god, Chemosh. The sacrifice unleashed a massive blast of raw, primordial energy. Empowered beyond anything Yahweh expected, Chemosh tore through the spiritual veil and violently tackled the demiurge. For one of the few times in his existence, Yahweh screamed in real pain as his stolen divine essence leaked out onto the dirt like glowing blood. Chemosh won the round. He drove the Israelite armies back in disgrace and dragged Yahweh's sacred golden vessels across the mud as trophies. This event was actually recorded on the real-world Mesha stele, one of the few times the other side got to brag in writing. Humiliated and wounded for the first time in centuries, Yahweh retreated to heaven. His ego fractured. He finally realized the terrifying truth. As long as humans believed in other gods, those gods could still hurt him. This revelation birthed a deep, festering paranoia that would define the rest of his reign. He resolved to end the age of many gods once and for all, no longer willing to share even an ounce of worship or power. Yahweh violently discarded Asherah, El's widow, whom he had taken as a forced trophy bride. He refused to send her to Tartarus, where she might plot with her husband El. Instead, he locked her away in a hyper-isolated, golden luxury cage on the highest, most restricted tier of heaven, beautiful, opulent, and completely alone. On earth, Yahweh commanded King Josiah's priests to carry out a brutal cultural purge. Around 622 BCE, they chopped down Asherah's sacred groves, smashed her altars, and systematically rewrote the scriptures to erase her name and feminine presence entirely. Monotheism would be mandatory. No more sharing, no more competition. Just as Yahweh believed his forced monotheism had finally secured absolute power, it backfired spectacularly. By narrowing his focus to one city, Jerusalem, and one temple, he made himself vulnerable. The Babylonian Empire marched in, destroyed Jerusalem, burned the temple to the ground, and dragged the people into exile. To the human world, it looked like a simple political conquest. In reality, the Babylonian national god Marduk had temporarily overpowered Yahweh, leaving the demiurge weakened and humiliated as his chosen people were taken captive. After the humiliation by Marduk and the Babylonian exile, Yahweh grew desperate to reclaim his earthly anchor. He struck a cynical deal with the rising Persian Empire. He influenced King Cyrus the Great to conquer Babylon and allow the Israelites to return to Judah. Under Persian protection, the Jews rebuilt the Second Temple. Yahweh used this period of relative peace to completely rewrite and edit his own scriptures, erasing competing gods, inflating his own importance, and rebranding himself as the one and only creator who had ever existed. For a brief moment, he actually believed his own propaganda. But Yahweh, in his arrogance, had forgotten about one of the biggest players still active on the board: Zeus, Jupiter to the Romans, and the entire Greek pantheon. In 332 BCE, Zeus sent his champion, Alexander the Great, marching across the Levant. What humans saw as a military conquest was, in reality, Zeus reasserting his market share on Earth. Hellenism spread like wildfire, bringing new temples, new philosophies, and new gods that directly challenged Yahweh's hard-won monopoly. Yahweh was furious. Then came Rome. In 63 BCE, the Roman Empire under Jupiter's influence annexed Judea. The tension built for over a century until, in 70 CE, Roman legions under Titus completely destroyed Jerusalem and burned the Second Temple to the ground. Yahweh's earthly throne was reduced to rubble. For the first time in a long while, Yahweh was spiritually bleeding. His carefully constructed monopoly was shattered. The land he had fought so hard to conquer was now ruled by yet another empire with its own powerful gods. He began to doubt, quietly, bitterly, whether he had ever truly been the only god that mattered. The bloodthirsty idiot who had spent centuries erasing, absorbing, and imprisoning other deities was finally forced to confront reality. The game was much bigger than he wanted to admit. In a moment of rare vulnerability, Yahweh got on his knees and prayed. And somewhere deep in the mysterious cosmos, Sophia, the Eon of wisdom who had accidentally given birth to him long ago, heard his prayer. She listened to the demiurge beg for more power, more control, more dominance. She heard him pray for the complete subjugation of all rival gods and the eternal worship of humanity. Sophia could only stare in disbelief and disgust, and wondered, how can any being, even a flawed one like Yahweh, pray for something so evil?